What's up guys, Andrew Bainey here, and on today's video we are going to be taking a look at the brand new plugin from Joey Sturgis Tones. This is called the Toneforge Jeff Loomis. This is a guitar amp sim plugin that has quite a few cool features that's obviously based off the legendary guitar player Jeff Loomis, who's famously known for his solo work, Nevermore, Arch Enemy, and Conquering Dystopia. First and foremost, I always like to show you guys a full demo mix, so we're going to get to that in just 1 second. So I'm playing a section of a song called The Heart Collector by Nevermore. It's tuned to A sharp standard on a 7-string guitar. I'm playing with my Schecter C7. So I did basically an amended version of the song, which is the intro and the outro of the song. I'm not playing the full thing because it's a little bit long for this video's purposes. But with all that being said, this is how the Jeff Loomis Toneforge plugin sounds. Alright, so now that I've shown you guys how this plugin can sound in a full demo mix, we're going to switch over to the computer view. So I'm going to go over all the features and specs of this plugin. So you'll notice when you first open the Toneforge plugin, you'll be greeted with this screen, which is where you can see all of your amp settings. And we'll go over that really soon, but first I just want to talk about the signal path and all of the features that are included. So as you can see on the bottom here, we have a number of different options. We're going to start all the way at the left with the effects pedal section. So you can see here there is a compression pedal and an overdrive pedal. Then next up we got the amp section, which is what I was just showing you. Then after that we have the cab sim section. Then we have a second pedal section. So this is like the after amp section, post effects I guess you would call it. Then you have an equalizer, and then last but not least, you have a dynamic range compressor. So switching back over to the amp view, since this is probably where the bulk of your time will be spent when you're adjusting your tones. In the amp section, there are 3 different amps. We have a clean amp, a rhythm amp, and a lead amp. So I'm gonna assume that these two are based off of like a Mesa Boogie dual rectifier, I'm pretty sure. Whereas the lead, that definitely looks like an EVH 5153 to me. Yeah, so you can pick between these 3 amps depending on what you're doing. So in my case, we're going to start off with the rhythm guitar tone since that is the bulk of what I was doing. So of course for this tone, I had the rhythm amp selected. You can see here on the bottom, these were essentially the settings that I was using. You got your master, presence, bass, mid, treble, gain. On this rhythm amp, you can also choose between 2 different tube modes as well, which is kind of cool. So you can choose between 6L6 or EL34. I chose EL34 because I have a 5153, like a real 5153, and that one has EL34, so I just am used to that sound, I guess. Yeah, so that's pretty much it in terms of the amp section. Of course, again, if you switch over to the lead amp, it has its own settings. Clean has its own settings, but they're pretty much the same in all of them with the exception of the rhythm amp, which also has that tube control. So next up, we're going to go over to the first of the 2 effects pedals sections. So this is before it hits the amp. So basically the first thing your guitar hits is these 2 pedals. In my case for the rhythm tone, I was using the tube screamer / overdriven pedal, I guess is what they call it. Clearly based off of like an Ibanez tube screamer or something like that. So I kept it pretty basic here. I had the drive all the way down, balance all the way up, and the tone at half. Usually for like a more like genty tone, I guess you could say, I usually have the tone knob at full. But for this one, since it was a little more organic and airy feeling, I didn't want it quite as extreme. And then to get out of this view, you just click back to FX Overview. I didn't use the compression pedal for rhythm tone, but of course, if you click it, you can open that up and take a look at the settings, output, sensitivity, and then on or off. We already went over the amp settings. Next up, we got the cab sim section. So this is pretty cool for a few reasons. Number one, you can have either a single or dual cab setup. In my case, for the rhythm tone, I used the dual cab setup because it's double tracked guitars. I thought this kind of made it sound even bigger and thicker. In addition to that, it comes with a bunch of different cab options. So if we switch back to the single view, you can see on the bottom here, you can switch between a JST matched cab. So this is basically Joey Sturgis Tone's recommended cab settings, which gives you basically no options other than level and pan. Or you can go JST Classic 412, and then in this case, you can actually switch between a few different mic options. Or we got Bogren Digital built into this as well, which comes with 4 different models of cabs. And then last but not least, you can load up your own impulse response. If you don't like any of these cabs and you have a go-to impulse response that you're dying to use, you can load that up in here pretty easily just as well. And then of course, like I said, in my instance, I was using the dual cab setting. So to turn that on, just click dual, and then exact same settings over on the right-hand side. You can change that to whatever you want. And then of course you got a blend control down at the bottom. So if you want more of the left or right cab, you can do that quite easily by just dragging that knob. Okay, next up we're going on to the second of the 2 effects pedal sections. So this is the post effects. Obviously for the rhythm guitar tone, I was not using this since I didn't want a bunch of reverb and delay on my rhythm guitars. But on the lead and clean tone, I definitely did use these. So we'll dive into those a little bit more when we get to those tones. So the first of the 2 pedals in this section is the Skybox pedal, which is basically a reverb pedal. Pretty familiar controls. You can select between a few different reverb options: cloud, choral, shimmer, room, plate, spring, or blood. And then of course you got your controls: decay, pre-delay, mix, tone, or mod. And of course turn that off or on with that switch. And if we go to the other one, Echo Man, this is your delay pedal. Again, pretty familiar controls that you would see on pretty much any delay pedal. Next up, moving on, we got the equalizer. As the name implies, this is obviously just an EQ section. I thought this one was kind of interesting because it actually has like pre-notched EQ selections. So for bass, it doesn't let you necessarily choose the exact bass frequency that you want. Instead, you got this rotary dial that switches between 30, 40, 50, 100, and so on and so forth. And same for all of these. So kind of interesting. Instead of letting you have complete control over the EQ, it only gives you certain notches, but fair enough. Probably enough control that most of you won't really notice or feel the need that you would want more anyways. But yeah, basically, you know, pretty standard for EQ. Let's say you want to go to 50 hertz and cut or boost, you know, just drag that up or down. Pretty simple. And it's the same for all 4 controls here. And then next up, last but not least, we got the dynamics. So this is essentially a low band compressor. In my case, I didn't really use this on any of the tones, I don't think. But to control that, you would basically select your crossover frequency with this dial and then the intensity with this one. But I had the intensity at 0, so it wasn't doing anything. Okay, so that's pretty much all the controls of this plugin. There are just a couple of quick things to mention. There's also, of course, a built-in tuner. So if you're playing with this or jamming with it live in real time, you also got a tuner built in. You don't need to open up another plugin. Always a nice feature. There's also something called a live setting. So I guess if you wanted to use this live, like have a laptop rig going on, you could totally do that. And you can actually load up presets here. And I think you can actually control it with MIDI, hence why there's a MIDI map setting there. I personally did not use this since I was using this to record, but again, a pretty cool feature to use if you want to use this live. Okay, so now that I've explained all of the controls of this plugin, we're going to take a listen to the 3 tones that I was using in my demo. Again, first we're going to start off with that rhythm tone. So basically I had one instance of this plugin running stereo, so I was feeding in a hard panned left and right DI track into the plugin, and that sounds like this. So yeah, it has a really cool tone to it. It sounds a lot more like airy than my tones normally would be, but I tried to do that in this instance since, again, I was doing a cover of a Nevermore song, and this sounded a little bit more like something they would do and not the standard like gent or deathcore tone that I'm accustomed to. But I thought it was really cool. It's a nice thick mezza-ish sounding sound, if that's a phrase, I guess. Yeah, so then we're just gonna play through that riff one more time, and I'll just play with a few knobs so you can hear what difference they make when you're listening to it. So let's get to it. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and play that one more time, but play around with this cab section quite a little bit. So I switched this over to single cab mode just so you guys can hear the differences a little more clearly than you would be able to in that dual cab mode. So we're gonna start off with the JST matched cab setting, since this is probably the most easy to use one because there's not really any other options on it. So let's hear how this sounds. So yeah, personally, I really liked the Model 4 from Bogren Digital, as well as the JST Classic with the 57 off-axis. Those were the two that I personally liked the most. Again, as I mentioned earlier, if you want to load your own impulse response, you can do that if you don't like how any of these sound, but I thought they were pretty good. So then, yeah, if you want to switch back to the dual mode, of course, we can go back to using the Bogren Digital and the JST Classic 412 at the same time, and that would sound like this. Okay, so that pretty much does it in terms of the rhythm guitar tone. Of course, there are also a ton of other presets that you can use that are included in this plugin. So if you just go ahead and click the name of your tone up here, you can switch to the default, or of course, one of the many factory preset tones. Okay, so I think that pretty much covers it in terms of rhythm tone stuff. So let's move on to the next tone, which is of course the lead tone. Now, as you guys know, if you've seen my channel before, I'm not too much of a lead player, so I apologize if my guitar soloing skills are nowhere near Jeff Loomis's. Obviously they're not, he's a guitar god, but I tried my best with this. So the tone that I was using for the lead looks as follows. So in this case, I was using both the guitar comp pedal and the overdriven pedal, whereas in the rhythm tone, I was not using the compressor. And then of course I'm on the lead channel, which is again that like 5150-ish sounding amp instead of the rhythm setting as with the rhythm tone. So we switch over to lead. And then for the cab, this time I only used a single cab. I didn't do a dual cab, and I was using that Model 4 from Bogren Digital. And then of course, in this instance, like I said, I would go into this section a little bit more. So this time I was using both of the post effects pedals, which of course are the Skybox. So this is my reverb, and the delay, which is the Echo Man. So let's take a listen to how this tone sounds, shall we? Okay, so that's how the lead guitar tone sounded. Of course, as with the rhythm tone, we're going to play that one more time, and I'm going to mess around with some knobs so you guys can hear what a difference in sound that those makes. So let's hear it. So as you can hear, especially on the skybox, you can get some quite drastically different sounds. This isn't the best example of how to use this because you probably wouldn't be wanting to use like the blood or cloud setting on an actual guitar solo. That would definitely be more useful in terms of like an ambient chord that's just filling in the background or something like that. And then if we go over to the Echo Man, again, we'll play around with these settings a little bit here. Okay, so finally we are moving along to the final guitar tone of this demo. This is, of course, the clean guitar tone. This is the only one that I think I actually used one of the presets that were built in and basically didn't change anything because I really liked how it sounded. So I believe this one was called the Dream Clean preset. As far as I remember, I didn't change anything on this and it sounded really good out of the box, like so. So yeah, I thought it sounded really neat. It had like nice ambient reverb going on, a little bit of delay, filled in the space really nicely because this one just kind of sits over top of that outro guitar riff. So for this one more time, we're using the guitar compression pedal, but not the overdrive, since of course there's basically almost no distortion on this. There's a tiny bit of gain going on with the clean amp. Well, I guess it looks like a lot of gain because the dial is so high, but since this is the clean amp setting, that amount of gain is really, really not much at all. And then we got everything else as seen here. For the cab, one more time, we're using just a single cab. Again, I tried to keep the whole dual cab setting only to the rhythm guitars to have those be really wide and big sounding, whereas the lead and the clean, I want it to be a little more narrow and in the center, so it kind of stuck out a little bit over top of the wide rhythm tone. And then of course on this one we were also using that reverb and delay. This time it looks like we were using spring instead of plate for the reverb, and the echo was doing pretty much the same thing as the lead tone. So one more time, let's take a listen. This time we're going to actually take a look at the amp settings a little more on this one, because obviously being a clean tone, that's where you'll hear the most difference. So let's play that clean tone one more time and play around with the amp. Okay guys, so that pretty much covers this plugin. If you guys are interested in getting the Jeff Loomis Toneforge plugin, there's going to be a link in the description and in the pinned comment. This plugin sounds really cool. It's nice to have a more mesa sounding plugin. I don't think any other amp sim that I have currently sounds like this. I typically go for more of like a 5150-ish sound. And this one has that too, to be fair, but I actually really personally liked the clean and rhythm sections of this plugin the most. I don't know, it kind of just gave me a more unique rhythm tone than anything that I got before that worked really well for this kind of style of music. Not that it's a style of music that I personally write and record that often, but it's a nice tool to have. And I'm sure if you wanted to, you can get dirty and make a deathcore tone or a gent tone still with this, no problem. Definitely not a one-trick pony. It does a lot of things for a pretty low price too. So again, a big thank you to the folks over at Joey Sturgis Tones for sending me this plugin. Go check out the link in the description or the pinned comment to check it out yourself. And of course, last but not least, a big thank you to all my Patreon members whose names are on the screen at this point in time. If you guys want audio downloads, guitar tabs, stems, or a shout out on the screen, you can find all of that over on my Patreon page. that's pretty much all I have to say. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Again, go check out those links. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.